I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old on Old. And this week we're going to be looking at a signature film in the film movement called German Expressionism. I'm talking about 1920s, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. So, if you guys are new to the series, what I do every single week is I break down a classic film I've never seen before. I talk about its historical context as to why I consider it a classic and why I want to emphasize it on one of these episodes, as well as my thoughts. This is movies I've never seen before, so these are my thoughts for the very first time, looking at it from a 2018 viewpoint and seeing if it sort of holds up, I guess you would say. Now, if you don't know the plot about Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, it's about a man who sort of controls a somnambulist who is a sort of a living, almost person who's been asleep for 23 years but now is awake and can control them. I don't know, some sort of magic, mystical element. And this man, he predicts another man's death. And then when that man, he actually dies, his good friend starts to investigate and wonder, is it the somnambulist? Was it the doctor? Who was it? And jumping over into the historical context, this is most associated, like I mentioned at the top of the show, with the film movement known as German Expressionism. This was a film movement sort of in the post-war, not post-war, but interwar era of Germany. So after World War I, but before World War II. And a lot of great films sort of came out in this period, but also this sort of period of political upheaval and sort of a lot of change going on in Germany. Because they lost the war in 1918, there was a lot of fear as to what happened. A lot of people felt that they didn't get the fair end of the deal in the Treaty of Versailles, so their economy started to take a hit. They started doing very bad, very poorly. So really we see it with a lot of these films, including The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is really the beginning of it. Sort of resort less to realism and less to sort of looking at real life, whereas say the Italian realism genre looked at real life and sort of the average person. Even films before this is the 1920s, this is very early. Films before this were just starting to become new, so they were just capturing real life, or capturing, basic things, with real life people, but those real life people are telling a story. This was the first film, and really this genre of German Expressionism that looked at even sort of kind of a genre, or sort of using film as an art form in that sense, and was expressionistic, was not realistic, or and sort of took a different take and sort of expressed those fears of what the uncertainty was around the corner. Eventually we know it led to the rise of the Nazi Party, but there's also, sort of a lot of times at this concern, they weren't as concerned about it, they're more concerned about the economy. But really, the filmmakers of the time, German filmmakers, captured this fear through this expressionistic sort of viewpoint, through monsters, think Nosferatu, or Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or sci-fi, think Metropolis. It's this all idea, the theme of fear and what's sort of happening and what's going to happen to them next was sort of a central theme of these films. But another theme of this film is its visual style. Because the film is silent, it sort of forces you to understand its visual style, and you notice a lot of things. Things like exaggerated, disproportionate sets, harsh lighting, sort of maybe over-the-top acting, kind of expressionistic is sort of a broad term, I understand that, but it is sort of everything sort of not the way it normally seems, and maybe sort of bigger, which sort of works well to this sort of horror, creepy themed aspect to the movie. And because of this sort of unique visual style, it's influenced many filmmakers today, particularly the use of shadows, for example. This is the first film that really emphasized its black and white nature, and really sort of the theme of light versus dark, theme of good versus evil, theme of truth versus lies. I mean, the sort of back and forth, the dynamic was really displayed visually between the black and the white, in terms that you don't know who to trust, you don't know who's bad for sure. They're sort of set up to be this way, but then throughout the film, maybe you're questioning the motives, or questioning what's happening, because it is a mystery. She uses a lot of the harsh shadows and unique manipulations with lighting particularly. And we see this influence today with a genre like the film noir genre of the 40s and 50s. Well, I guess not today, but that was sort of the film noir genre was very heavily influenced from this. It sort of was Hollywood's version of taking sort of the visuals, some of the visuals from this, but putting the crime aspect onto it. And German Expressionism, this, especially this film in particular, it had sort of influenced a lot of genres. It was the film noir genre. You see clearly a lot of Tim Burton's work. We see it in even the horror genre, because this being sort of a mystery horror type movie. Because of how sort of off the world is, and how the characters are sort of visibly and sort of over the top and sort of acting kind of very strange, it makes them a lot creepier, and that can work for horror when done right, and sort of if you strike a good balance, and I think this film does. So really, I mean, there's so many different influences. This film is very influenced into many different genres, which is why it's sort of a classic movie. And it has also a really sort of innovative ending, which I won't spoil for you if you haven't seen it. But transitioning into that, into my thoughts, I think it's a film that you should watch the film if you're interested in film history and learning more about film. The more I do this series, the more I appreciate sort of the historical context of the episodes, not necessarily my thoughts, because I really learn more about films and really understand sort of the mind frame people were at a certain time, or pop culture, or anything like that. So I really want to tackle this film. This is also the first silent film I've done. Now, that's not for any mistake. Mostly, I haven't seen a lot of silent films personally. Also, silent films have a different pace to them, which is sort of sometimes hard for me to get in, truthfully. A lot of times I'd much rather see it sort of a classic movie that has sound and sort of something I'm at least familiar with. But in this case, I'm glad I sort of went out of my comfort zone in that sense, because as I'm starting to watch more silent film, I'm starting to understand the pace better, and therefore I'm able to judge kind of what I like versus what I don't like, or even quality versus not so quality. Unfortunately, there's not too many silent films that are not super great. A lot of the silent films are sort of these classic movies that you have to watch. So in that sense, it's kind of hard to judge, but still the storytelling aspect is there, and that's what I appreciate about this. There's not too many times that you see a truly unique and truly new movie that you've never seen before. Yes, you could say, oh yeah, but this looks like the noir movies of today, or you could say, it looks like Tim Burton movies of today, or horror movies, but it has a distinct visual style to it. That hasn't been replicated. It's new, it's different, it feels fresh in that way. And I think that because it's a silent film, it also has a different pace to it. At times, I'm not going to lie, it can be hard to get engaged, because you're almost so focused in on it that when it just moves as normally as a modern day movie would go, just a little slower, I guess, you want something to happen more frequently, more often, and you're trying to pick out these visual pieces because there's no spoken word to it. So you have to wrap your head around this. Plus, I don't think it's a great introductory silent film either. I know they show this in film classes and whatnot, but for me, it's a silent film which is a unique piece on its own, so that's a big challenge. And then there's a mystery, so you have to figure out, what's going on, try to predict who's the killer and all this stuff. So that sort of adds an extra layer onto it. I can barely follow, thrillers like Gone Girl sometimes. That sort of mess with your mind. This one messes with your mind and is also silent. So in a lot of cases, it's hard for me to recommend, but if you're into film and you're into learning more about it, it's so different and unique. I think you'll have at the very least, a unique experience watching it. It may not captivate you, but the thing is because it is silent, it forces you really to look at the elements on screen, how sort of the visual acting sort of tells it. Particularly, I noticed out the score. I know everyone talks about the visual elements, but the score was really incredible, because in silent films, the score has to carry more narrative weight in terms of telling the story narratively and making that story clear to the audience. There's a great sequence where it sort of is very string heavy and very scary, and then that sort of string heavy transitions into sort of a light carnival theme, sort of keeping on that theme of the uneasiness and sort of the distorted reality of things. Things may not be as they seem. I just thought that there's these little elements that the filmmakers put in, and especially the score, which was maybe not discussed about as much, really does a great job as sort of, because there's no dialogue, really sort of emphasizing, and you have to rely more on the score, and the score here did a good job actually telling the narrative, which is more than just, maybe the theme scores of today. They actually sort of symbolize the characters' thoughts and emotions, which is kind of what all composers really want to do. So, I think that this sort of nightmare-esque world, I want to say dream-esque, but it's more of a nightmare-esque world, really works for this sort of horror sort of story. The story, for the most part, is engaging. I mean, sure, it's still a mystery. It's still, you want to figure out. It's not like it's an art film that's also silent. You do want to figure out what's happening. So in that sense, it's popular culture, but it is a silent film, so it has a unique pace to it. So it's kind of hard for me to recommend, aside from, say, what I experienced. And I experienced sort of a great experience because, yes, I'm not sure how much I'm going to rewatch this movie. Yes, I'm not sure how much I would recommend it to people, because it is such a, you have to be in a unique place, you have to want to learn more about film. I mean, it really is for people who are trying to study film, which is maybe why it's in film studies courses across the globe. Because it really treats film as an art form. It treats it as not just as a picture of reality, as its own thing. This is sort of an artistic take. There's weird camera angles, but they're not actually camera angles moving. The camera doesn't move. It's how the set is, and sort of how it's distorted, and there's multiple layers, and sort of depth of field, and all these different things. Because it's silent, it forces you to look at the visual elements of the film and really appreciate the visual storytelling and how much you can tell visually. Yes, there are a lot of interludes of the sort of text, but ultimately I think that this is a film that really helps you understand the very sort of basics of film, because it has such a distinct visual style, and because it's silent. I always ask myself, would this film be better silent? Is it silent versus with audio? Charlie Chaplin film relies so much on the physical comedy, so that can't be audio. But I could see this movie, for example, being audio, but that still doesn't take away what the strength of the movie is that it's because it's silent, it therefore requires you to look at the visual elements of the film. And therefore, if you're interested in film, it has a great historical context. You can see a lot of inspiration, and you can also see sort of how easy it is to tell a story visually, but also how hard it is to tell a story visually and keep your audience engaged. And so many elements have to go into the screen and to just go into it at once to really create this amazing story. That's about it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Make sure you comment below. Let me know some of your favorite silent films, and if you want me to cover any more silent films. Old Oscar Countdown's coming up right around the corner. That should be pretty fun. A couple more episodes. I also have Peter Weir coming out next month. That's the Masters of Controlled Chaos. That will be the last episode. I normally do one a month, but that'll be the last. So as I go into full Old Oscar Countdown. That's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and until next time, stay tuned.